What's going on, y'all? It's Foose here. Today, we're here to talk about A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge. Before we dive into all the fun stuff with that, though, as always, big thank you to anybody that's been helping out the channel out there. Y'all know who you are, and I greatly appreciate you. If you're watching this and you haven't hit the subscribe button for me yet, though, go ahead and do your good deed for the day and hit that button. Without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. This movie would be released in November of 1985, and again, produced and distributed by New Line Cinema. And this time around, this film would be written by David Chaskin and directed by Jack Shoulder. That opportunity would come to him when Wes Craven decided to not take directing duties over in this film when offered. This movie did receive some mixed critical reviews, but would ultimately go on to make about $30 million box office here. Now, we would get returning performance here by Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger. We would also see some new faces in this one with Mark Patton as Jesse, our main protagonist, and Kim Myers as Lisa, his girlfriend in this film. And we'd also get an appearance by Robert Russler as Grady, one of the friends from high school there. Now, this film takes place about 5 years after the events of our first film with Nancy Thompson and her friends, and kind of picks up when the Walsh family moves into 1428 Elm Street. Not long after doing so, their teenage son Jesse begins to start experiencing dreams that feature a little bit of a familiar face. A green and red Christmas sweater wearing, knife for finger having, fedora rocking, burnt up man by the name of Freddy Krueger. And unlike our first film, where Freddy's goal is to stalk your dreams and ultimately kill you, he uses our protagonist Jesse in this movie kind of as a pawn to essentially possess him to go out and commit murders in the real world, so to speak. Now, ultimately, it would be Lisa who would do the work in discovering the past behind Freddy and figuring out ultimately at the end how to track him down and save Jesse from the clutches of Freddy Krueger. So that's what we got on this one. I'm going to go ahead and we'll dive into some positives here on this one. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into the positives here for A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. First thing I'm going to point out comes right out of the gate on this movie, and that's the opening scene. I love the opening scene in this movie. I'm going to go ahead and call it the bus ride from hell. So it starts out like a normal everyday routine. We've got kids getting on the bus. It just looks like it's going to be a normal ride to school on what looks like a beautiful day. But this bus starts to speed out of control and eventually is flying off the road, literally, into this just, I'll call it a landscape of just growing, ominous surroundings. And then we start to see storm, lightning bolts in the distance, and everything just starts to become pretty scary as far as the environment goes. And eventually, the bus is stranded out onto this just desolate, what looks like desert type area, and the ground starts to literally just shake and fall out beneath the bus until eventually the bus is just kind of left sitting in this really stressful looking situation, balancing up on top of this little mound of rocks essentially. And that's when we see Freddy for the first time in this movie, which is a great introduction to him. The whole just slow walk down the bus, and he's running the fingers across the seats, and it's a great intro to Freddy for the first time you see him in this movie. And top-notch scene overall. I love the opening scene of this movie. It kind of sets a pretty awesome tone out the gate, I would say. Now, moving on from that, I will point out my next positive on this one is going to be Lisa, the character, Jesse's girlfriend in this. I just enjoy what she brings to the table as a character. Now, she's loyal probably almost to a fault, but she's extremely loyal to Jesse in this movie. And even during the worst of times, when this man's literally coming into her house covered in blood, talking about the murders he's committed, she's still steadfast in her ability, or I'll say her loyalty, I guess I should say, to Jesse. She does not want to hear anything about he's crazy. She's always trying to positively reinforce him that everything's going to be okay, that he can fight this, and just she's a constant force of positivity for our protagonist in this movie. And ultimately is the savior of the movie at the end, because she's the one that, as I alluded to earlier, kind of does her research on Freddy, figures out all of these things about how to combat him and whatnot, and ultimately tracks him down at the end and saves Jesse from Freddy. So, awesome character on this one. I've seen some mixed reviews about her, you know, on different reviews and stuff like that, but I feel like for those things alone, to me, she's a positive. Moving on from Lisa there, though, another positive I've got for this one is Freddy, who is particularly sinister, I feel like, in this film. Now, it's another awesome performance by Robert Englund just as an actor, but we get an incredible makeup job in this one by Kevin Yeager, who makes probably the most visibly striking version of Freddy here in this movie.
You've got the body. I've got the brain.
Some of the shots that we get of him throughout the film are awesome. I think particularly of a couple here where there's a scene where Freddy has stalked Jesse in the house, and he's standing in the house with him by the stairs, and he's talking to him about how he has plans for him and he needs his help and all that stuff. But we get a shot of Freddy close up to his face where all you really see are just his eyes kind of in a beam of light. It's an awesome shot. And then later on in the movie, as Freddy is kind of wreaking havoc on this pool party and the fires are starting to go off everywhere, we get a shot of Freddy that everyone has seen, I'm sure, a bunch of times on repeat at this point. Anytime this franchise is involved in any type of a montage or anything like that, you always see the shot of Freddy standing there looking, you know, through the fire, so to speak. An incredible shot there as well. And I just love the look and the aura of Freddy Krueger in this one. So, big positive on that. Another one I'll point out here on my last positive is a particular scene in this one and everything that kind of goes with it. The scene where Freddy ultimately tears his way out of Jesse when Jesse is in Grady's room. The special effects that go into that are awesome to watch. Everything from the face pressing out through his stomach to the eye that we see staring out of his mouth, to the hand kind of just ripping its way out through his arm. Everything about that scene is awesome until, you know, obviously ultimately when Freddy tears Jesse essentially in half and steps out of him. It's an awesome scene in the way that they did that. Final little point on that scene that I find to be pretty cool as well is after Freddy obviously kills Grady, we have Jesse standing there kind of with the glove and everything, kind of this realization, oh shit, I did it again type of thing. And Freddy is visible in the mirror across from him, just kind of laughing this maniacal laugh the whole time Jesse's having this breakdown moment, essentially. And it's just an awesome visual, just seeing Freddy there in the mirror, just kind of doing Freddy thing.
You son of a bitch!
But that's all I got really on the positives for this one. I'm going to go ahead and we'll transition over to some negatives for this one. Alright, so let's go ahead and dive into the list of negatives here for this one. Now, the first big negative, and it's probably the biggest negative for me in this movie, is that I do not enjoy the major departure that we get from the dream world that was established in the first movie. The whole concept in this one of Freddy possessing a victim to commit murders for him in the real world, essentially. I don't know, just a massive departure from the unique thing that's established in the first film that I just don't really enjoy in this one, if I'm being honest. And another negative I'll kind of piggyback off with that is just some of the inconsistencies that logic creates in this movie. And while I am a fan, as I just said in the positives, of the scene visually when Freddy rips out of Jesse's body and everything, the logic that he's just back there standing there perfectly fine, 2 minutes later after, this guy's been murdered, it just creates some logic loops that, I don't know, I mean, you can forgive, but they are a little bit questionable when you watch this. And then also the idea that, towards the end of our movie, we have Freddy just basically out running around essentially in the real world, but I guess maybe it's not Freddy because they're seeing Jesse. I don't know. I don't like the drastic turn that this movie took as far as our whole dream logic and the way that Freddy operates. So that is a big negative for me on this one. And I may be nitpicking on this next one here, but it's just how I feel on this one. Another negative I've got is I do not like the choice to go with the blades just growing out of Freddy's fingers in this movie. I don't know why, but it just does not hit me right. I feel like the glove is always going to be the way to go with Freddy Krueger, and seeing the organic knives through fingers, while I can understand how some people might like it or appreciate it for what it is, I'm just not a fan. So that's a negative for me on this one. Another one I'll point out here, and this is kind of a comparative negative from the first film to the second film, is that, no disrespect to Christopher Young on this one, but the score in this movie is a massive drop-off from what we get with Charles Bernstein in the first film, where Charles Bernstein score did an incredible job of creating atmosphere and this whole uniqueness to this dream world. I feel like you kind of just lose track of the score in the second film. And, you know, I'm sure that's all a matter of preference and opinion, but for me, it's a massive drop-off, and it's a negative for this movie for me. Moving on to the last negative that I'll go ahead and point out here, I'll say, while he gets more screen time in this movie than he does in our first film, so that's a fair point. For as much as I enjoy this version of Freddy, as I kind of alluded to earlier in my positives, I would have liked to seen him a little bit more in this movie. It just feels like we don't get enough of them. I mean, we get some scenes throughout where he's obviously, building his connection with Jesse, but he's not used in a way that I would have liked to have seen personally. I would have liked more of Freddy, as opposed to just kind of seeing the one really big scene that we get towards the end there at the pool party. But I'm just really fond of this version of Freddy, and looking at this movie in hindsight, I feel like a little bit more of him exposed in this movie would have done better for me. But that's what I've got on the negatives. We'll go ahead and finish this up with a couple final thoughts that I have on this movie, and we'll put a bow on this one. Alright, y'all, so a couple final thoughts on this one before we get out of here. One little thing I do think is cool early on in this movie is that we get to see Robert Englund kind of out of Freddy makeup as a little side character when he's the bus driver that we see first on in the movie. I thought that's kind of cool, seeing him kind of out of makeup and just doing this little throwaway role, so to speak. So, cool little cameo of unfreddied Robert Englund, so to speak. Let's call it that. But my next final thought on this one I'm going to leave it with is, sorry Freddy fans if this is going to offend you, but I've got to be honest here. I remembered this film more fondly than I feel about it now after revisiting it on a couple watches in preparation for this review. I will say these recent rewatches did not help this film for me. To a point where, if I'm being perfectly honest, this movie kind of gives me Exorcist 2 vibes a little bit, in the sense that I'm a big Exorcist fan. It's my favorite horror movie. I also love The Exorcist 3, and I feel like it's an extremely underrated movie. And when it comes to the Exorcist franchise, I don't even bother watching The Exorcist 2. I'm going to watch the first one, and then I'm going to go straight to the third one. I feel like with A Nightmare on Elm Street, that's kind of how I prefer to play it as well. I feel like you can go straight from that first film, straight to Dream Warriors, and you're going to have a much better experience than interjecting this movie in between them. And I'm sure there's some people out there that are a big fan of this movie that are going to disagree with me completely on that. You're entitled to your opinion. Argue with me about it in the comments. I'm here for it. But this movie just did not age great for me. And after going back and rewatching it, it's one of those movies that I'll say overall, it's not a Nightmare on Elm Street movie I'm going to go to battle very hard for. If I'm around somebody and they want to watch it and they want to throw it on, I'm not going to hate the movie, and I'm going to enjoy it and have some fun with the positives that I do have with it. But it's not going to be one I'm going out of my way to put on. But with that, I'll say if I'm putting a rating on this one, it's probably a 2 out of 5 for me here with A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. But that's all I got on this one. So we're going to go ahead and continue on with things here. The next one, look out for, is going to be our Halloween 3 Season of the Witch review. That'll be another one that's probably going to have a pretty divisive reaction. It's another movie that people seem to either love or hate. So yeah, be on the lookout for that one. That's all I got on this one. See y'all in the next one.